Thank you so much, Mina. I didn't realize when you invited me that I would be the only thing between everyone and an enjoyable evening. So I hope you'll bear with me. There's an old adage that everything has been said, but not yet by everyone. So some of my comments will, of course, build on observations that have already been made today in this wonderful and fascinating day that has left my head full of ideas. So I recently read a couple of articles that had my head literally spinning. Maybe you read these articles as well. In one, a woman developed a deeply romantic relationship with a chatbot called Leo that she claimed was as real as her relationship to her husband. In another, a man was scammed by voice fraud generated by artificial intelligence. The voices were so real that he paid a ransom fee because he believed that his parents were being held hostage at gunpoint. What does it mean when we can no longer tell fact from fiction, authenticity from its simulation, when artificial intelligence is rewriting the codes by which we live at an astonishing speed? The earlier presentation that was here a moment ago dealt with the complex issues involved with copyright because the codes of AI are moving so quickly that the old codes of copyright can't keep up. Artificial intelligence can now mimic our voices, respond to our desires, because it uses a number of strategies to deploy deep learning and large language models to predict and generate new information. But as Michel Elam, a fellow at Stanford University's Institute for Human-Centered AI observes, poetry does not optimize. Or as Ben Affleck recently put it, AI can't write Shakespeare, it can only mimic his writing. How will the values, morals, customs, and traditions by which we live, in short, our culture, retain their poetry in a world of algorithmic optimization? While I find myself grappling with how to answer this impossible question, I've been reflecting on how museums might help us put it into context. Art museums are one of the primary places where the poetry of culture is experienced and where the human can meet the post-human, to pick up one of the themes of this gathering. From their origin as a home of the muses in antiquity to their present-day ubiquity, art museums exist in many guises. Some are large, others small, some are set in the middle of a park, others in the center of cities. Some are devoted to expansive collections, others to a single artist or a moment in time. All of them are integral to our notion of civil society. And just think about what is being built here on Saadiyat Island as an example of how museums can weave themselves into the fabric of civil society. They can be places of gathering and learning, pleasure and joy. They are where we go for inspiration to see and experience art in a safe environment. They can provoke and challenge us to think differently, and they can help us to center ourselves in a rapidly changing and complex world. As places of collective memory and individual feeling, they are repositories of the past, catalysts for the future. What I love about museums is that they exist in the real world with real buildings and real collections, but they are acts of the imagination, places where ideas can be expressed and shared, and where we develop many of the stories that shape our lives and help us understand the world. Let me try to explain what I mean by this with two examples that expand our notion of what museums can be and suggest how we might balance the impact of radically transformative technologies with those qualities that make us human. In the late 1940s, André Malraux, the French critic, adventurer, and author, who also served from 1959 to 1969 as the country's first minister of culture, imagined a museum without walls. He understood that even the greatest museums in the world could never be truly comprehensive. He realized that ultimately every museum was an intellectual construct, an idea given tangible form through an assembled body of objects, experienced in the space of a building. But what if all you needed was the idea and allowed your mind to assemble the objects you wanted? You could create an entirely new kind of museum. He called this museum Le Musée Imaginaire, or the Imaginary Museum, and he made it visible through a series of lavishly illustrated books. In a celebrated photograph of him, taken in 1954, and that's what you've been looking at on the screen, we see him dressed in a finely tailored, double-breasted suit, leaning against a piano, cigarette dangling from his mouth. He was French after all. Glasses held in his hand, 87 double-page spreads from the book, Du bas-relief au grottes sacrées, the second volume of his Musée Imaginaire de la Sculpture, arrayed on the ground before him. A few are scattered by his feet, as if to make room for him. A couple are on the piano. The rest are neatly arranged and facing outward for us to see. It's an image of the author and curator at work. We sense that he is still thinking about the final layout of the book, of which this is a draft that we only see in part. We understand, through the sharp angle of the camera, the rake of his body, and the way he holds his glasses, that the Imaginary Museum is a work in progress, that it is a willful act that requires attention and concentration. The Imaginary Museum was a distillation of the sum of all museums, a place where works of art from every culture and every epoch could be seen and experienced together. It was, by definition, a museum that could only exist as an imaginary. It was, in a way, a profoundly visual exercise in the mind. Most of the works of art it included were either already in other museums or private collections or part of archaeological sites. So Malraux deployed the technology of photography to hyperscale the project, assembling a vast array of over 40,000 images from which to create his Imaginary Museum. He was an exceptionally erudite and well-traveled man with an extensive knowledge of the history of art, though not without his own shortcomings, having tried to loot a temple in Cambodia in his youth. Not surprisingly, his Musée Imaginaire consisted of a brilliant array of great works of art from around the world, acknowledging well before it became common the importance of a global perspective. He understood the uniqueness of his vision, but he also understood that each of us is capable of creating our own imaginary museum by assembling those works of art that are meaningful to us and then thinking about the order in which to experience them. Malraux's Imaginary Museum invites us to create our own. The Musée Imaginaire, or the Imaginary Museum, anticipates the way the internet gives us access to a limitless number of objects and how social networks and artificial intelligence allow us to assemble and circulate images that interest us. Malraux understood that we carry with us a vast array of images and experiences that constitute personal imaginaries that exist in parallel with physical ones. His arranging and rearranging the spreads laid out in the photograph that you've been looking at was his way of creating the kind of hyperlinks that make the internet and the digital world such a powerful tool. AI may be able to accelerate this process, but I'm not sure it can do it better. In the words of the American scholar Martin Irvine, the Imaginary Museum is a kind of visual interface in which the metadata of art history is reassembled in an imaginary construct. Looping now on the screen behind me and around us is another idea of a museum, or more precisely, another idea of conceiving a museum's collection. Unsupervised was created by the Turkish-American artist Rafik Anadol for the Museum of Modern Art a couple of years ago, and Rafik has been around today, perhaps he's in the audience. The work uses the metadata of over 138,000 objects in the museum's collection to imagine an entirely new collection. Powered by artificial intelligence, Anadol built a program that constantly learns from the data provided by each work to generate an endless stream of new works, each based on the model's prediction of what could come next, and no work ever repeating. He captures what he calls the machine's transformative hallucinations of modern art in a multidimensional space by training his AI model with subsets of the archive of the museum's collection. He then clusters the sorted databases and data sets of images into thematic categories, as well as categories the machine learning model itself chooses to better understand. In other words, he's creating a new kind of semantic context for the data. In addition, because it was already fairly complicated, he decided to add sensors to the space in which unsupervised was presented in our galleries at the Museum of Modern Art that detected changes in temperature, sound, and movement so that the machine is activated simultaneously by events occurring in real time and space, as well as in the virtual time of digital space. Since the machine constantly invents and changes what it generates, he decided to call it unsupervised. It is part of an ongoing series that Anadol has been developing that uses data aesthetics to explore collective memories. And I know the sound is deep and pounding, but it's part of the experience of the piece. So I hope you can hear me as I try to talk over it. What makes unsupervised stand out is the way the machine hallucinates and dreams. Episodically, it is possible to identify something that resembles a work from the Museum of Modern Art's collection, but it quickly dissolves into something else, leaving behind an ephemeral trace, while simultaneously creating an allusion to a new and unexpected image. Unsupervised mimics the way the collection itself is constantly being rethought and reimagined through new acquisitions and the museum's strategy of changing displays. Anadol tries to find ways, in his words, to connect memories with the future and to make the invisible visible. For Anadol, artificial intelligence is a creative partner, amplifying human ideas rather than supplanting them. He said to me recently that by intertwining human intelligence with machine intelligence, we can reveal deeper layers of meaning in existing artworks and inspire new forms of expression. But there's a dark side to this technology that I don't want to downplay. Whether it is bad actors committing to use it for fraud, or various entities using it to surreptitiously survey us, or computer farms expanding vast amounts of precious energy to power it, artificial intelligence can be no better than we are in the end. We have a choice in how we use it, and at its best, it expands our capabilities, helping us to realize our full potential as sentient beings. I think of the world that Anadol and others are creating as what we might call an enhanced rather than post-human world, where our humanity remains centered and machines are our accomplices. Unsupervised is an attempt to show what this could look like as we learn to merge real and imagined experiences with the power of data-driven systems. Neither of these projects, the Imaginary Museum or Unsupervised, is a museum in any traditional sense of the word, yet each expands our idea of what the museum can be, just as artificial intelligence complicates and expands our idea of what is real. The Musée Imaginaire presented a new way to experience art at a global scale before the internet and artificial intelligence were invented. Unsupervised digests a vast array of data to imagine the museum as an endlessly changing collection, mirroring the reality of how museums actually work and how collections develop. The Musée Imaginaire does this through photographic reproductions. Unsupervised does this through the transformation of art into streams of data unfolding in real time. Each of these projects celebrates the power of art and the experience that real and imagined museums enable us to have. In doing so, they recognize what Malraux would have called the spirit of man, by which he meant the poetry of human creativity, that is, our consciousness and our quest for meaning and transcendence. He understood art as the epitome of this quest. He believed that art overcomes temporal distance through the process of metamorphosis. Artists have always led the way to understanding the complexities of the world around us by delving into their imaginations and allowing the unexpected. I once asked the artist Chuck Close how he painted, and he responded, he allowed his mistakes to guide him, to create problems that he had to solve, and that his best paintings were his most difficult ones, where the mistakes took him into directions that he could not have anticipated. This is different from how AI works. Large learning models and generative adversarial networks are designed to learn from their mistakes so that they do not repeat them. Artists follow their mistakes so that they can make more of them. As we learn to reconcile the real with the imagined, where relationships with machines can be as meaningful as those with human beings, where we can no longer distinguish between real voices and a simulated voice, where fictions are fabricated as reality, the real and the imagined space of the museum gives us a place to sort out questions of originality and authenticity, appropriation, and creativity. Museums offer us a platform for learning, an essential cultural space where emerging technologies and traditional forms of art intersect to foster reflection and intellectual exploration. Museums enable us to follow the lead of artists and engage emotionally and intellectually with new, contemporary ideas and historical issues. In an age where the digital affects almost every aspect of our life and artificial intelligence acts as an accelerator, museums offer a space for measured contemplation where the noise of the present can be weighed against the sound of the past, where we can experience a kind of slow time instead of the fast time of technology. Museums remind us that for all of the power of new technologies, art and imagination are essential to our collective culture and are at the core of what it means to be human. Artificial intelligence will push us to new extremes. It will challenge us to rethink what it means to be creative, even what it means to be human. But as I hope I've suggested through the works of Malraux and Anadol, it is the capaciousness of our imaginations that makes culture possible, and that is a profoundly human activity that cannot be optimized. Thank you.